Mr. Farage, as we were talking about supranational challenges, what do you think when you hear the word? We need a more European dimension faced with these sort of challenges, no? Is that what you think?
Well, the problem here, there's a little word missing. It's called democracy. And the idea in democracy is that you vote for a government, and if you think they've done a rotten job, then once every 4 years, depending on your rules, you get the opportunity to get rid of them and to vote for somebody else with an entirely different manifesto. That's the concept that we understand in Britain of parliamentary democracy, and it's a concept that, in fact, we've tried to spread to the rest of the world. The difficulty with supranational government, the difficulty with climate change, is if we sign up to things that commits us between now and 2020 as to how we should behave, then we have to ask ourselves, what is the point in voting in future in general elections in our nation states? And that, I think, gets to the very heart of the difficulty in the EU. The political class around this table believe in the European project, want to pursue it, believe that climate change is one of the great threats, and yet increasingly a sceptical population.
So you're against, for example, fighting climate change together on a European level. You believe this is completely wrong?
I am against. Well, I mean, clearly, if CO2 emissions are causing global warming, then whatever Europe does is frankly irrelevant. Frankly irrelevant. We have to deal with this, taking what India and China and other countries are doing. So that's the point to make, that there has to be a global deal if that's our key concern. But what I'm concerned about governments making commitments that bind future governments between now and 2020 or whatever that deal may be. And that goes against the very principle that we can get rid of our governments and vote for somebody else. And that's a very real issue.
After Lisbon Treaty, what can Parliament and Europe achieve? Would you like to start the ball rolling, Mr. Farage?
2 countries voted no to the Constitution, so they repackaged it, they changed the name, they called it the Lisbon Treaty, and the only country that had a vote voted no. Just as before, of course, only 2 countries had a vote on the euro, and they both voted no. The fact is, what these people around this table represent is a political class of people who believe in these institutions, and that's fine. But the peoples of Europe increasingly don't, and it's very difficult to call this European election, it really is. But I do think the level of protest vote is going to be absolutely enormous.
Graham Watson, do you think that one day we will get this Lisbon Treaty and the Constitution in one revised form or another following its initial rejection?
I think we'll get to the Lisbon Treaty. There are those who oppose it. There are some organisations fighting it, perhaps financed by the extreme right in America, which doesn't want to see European development. But it's clear that at the same time the vast majority of Europeans want this development. Because we know we're stronger when united and poorer when we're not. In my opinion, it's very probable the Lisbon Treaty will be adopted, but we may have to wait another 6 months to get it.
Well, I want to say from the start that it's just not true to say people have said no to more Europe in their lives. That's wrong. In my opinion, this idea that on one side you have the people and on the other the members of the European Parliament is completely false. Whether we like it or not, we represent the people.
I don't want groups like Mr. Farage's thinking that if Lisbon fails then Europe disappears. No, Europe will continue. Our citizens expect us to solve their problems, and it's centre-right governments who are currently in power in every country who are advancing and proposing answers. Little parties have no say, no responsibility, nothing to do with this, so they can say what they like. That's the difference between serious politicians and those who spout rubbish because they have no alternative policies to propose, or don't want to. Farage belongs to a group that's always going on about legitimacy via referendum. But he ignores the fact some countries have no tradition of such a vote where international treaties are concerned. And he maintains parliamentary ratification is less valid than a referendum. I don't think that's acceptable. Germany has no tradition of holding referendums, and I'll tell you why. In Germany, I have always been against them. Imagine if enlargement had been subject to Well, maybe you should listen first and laugh afterwards. So I'll start again. Imagine if Germany had held referendums on Polish, Czech or other new members. I don't think it would have been a good idea if Germany had held European enlargement hostage to referendums. The ratification in both houses of the German parliament was absolutely democratic. My last comment, Mr. Farage, is that there were 4 referendums on the Constitution. One in the Netherlands, lost. One in France, lost. And 2 others. In Spain, 72% voted yes, and in Luxembourg, the yes vote was 60%. In all the countries that held referendums, the majority voted for the Constitution. Do you respect that democracy, Mr. Farage?
Mr. Schulz, what you're saying, Mr. Schulz, the implications of what you're saying for the whole concept of democracy is truly terrifying. You're saying we mustn't ask the German people what they think, we must lead them. I mean, this is terrifying. And I'll never forget, the day after the Irish voted no, you in that chamber said we must not bow to populism. I mean, I hope you will now apologise for that comment. It is an absolutely... You are not just... You are anti-democratic. You believe a ruling class knows what's best for ordinary people.
Oh, it's an honour to be called anti-democratic by you. Thank you. Europe has given us 60 years of peace. Europe protects us without protectionism, which is worth underlining. Europe is reassuring, and it's the EU's founding fathers who got us to where we are today, with 60 years of peace and enlargement achieved in a war-free continent. Oh, very well, Mr. Farage, if you want a war, go ahead. When I look around me at today's European citizens, it only increases the respect I have for the EU's founding fathers. It's lucky they were around, not more people like you. If that had been the case, we would have been at war all the time. So I believe that when I explain to my children and grandchildren today with my colleague Martin Schulz when we crossed the frontier what the situation was like 40 or 50 years ago, that's what Europe means. So for all those who don't feel comfortable in Europe, Mr. Farage, in the new Lisbon Constitution there's a paragraph that says anyone who feels out of place can leave. That's not in the Nice Treaty. If you feel out of place, vote for Lisbon and you can leave the next day. That's provided for in the Constitution, Mr. Farage.
I'd rather leave before Lisbon, thank you very much.
Is your blanket no to the European Union and its treaties linked to a purist conception of market economies and a totally free market?
À faveur du marché, de la liberté de marché.
I firmly believe that we're part of a global economy, not a European economy, and I watch what these institutions are doing within the EU, and we're not fit for a global economy given the social market model that we're building through the institutions of the European Union.
Are you a free marketeer when it comes to jobs? What do you think of the protests we've seen in many countries, not only in Britain, where workers have called for a nationalist defence of their employment?
I think that to open your borders to people from very poor countries in Eastern Europe and to say to them, as many of you as want to come can, is insane. And we should operate a proper work permit system. To find out more about who we are and what we stand for, go to the UK Independence Party website at www.ukip.org.